Everyone, it is 10 o'clock on the dot. We're about to start. We have a couple of people up here that will be signing in. Just a couple of reminders. If you are parked where there is a parking meter, we do actually give tickets with regards to the parking meter. So if you need to put money in the parking meter, you might want to do so, or download the Passport app. So just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. The other thing is, depending upon where the meter is, most of them do take change as well as credit cards, or you can do the app if you have it on your phone. But wanted to make sure that you were aware that yes, you can get a ticket. The next thing is that for this meeting today, we ask that you go ahead, put your phones on mute so that and silence them so that hopefully they will not ring. If you have not signed in, please do so because that is how you will receive your materials. The next thing is that if you are representing more than one organization today, that we ask that you sign in for all of those organizations. So I'm gonna give you a few minutes to finish everyone up here to sign in, and then we're gonna get started. Yes, yes, this is our department. I think I should be in it too, if I'm not mistaken. But if I'm not, then you can still leave the information. Yes. Okay, everyone, it is 5 minutes after. We will go ahead and get started. Just a couple of reminders. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start off with our welcome, and then we'll kind of go into a couple of updates. With regards to this particular area, you received a survey. We ask that you submit your survey before you leave today. There's a box right there on the end. If you are representing more than one organization, we ask that you sign in for each organization that you may be representing today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Wanzina Jackson, and I am the director for Macon-Bibb County Economic and Community Development Department. Thank you so much for coming out this morning for the Community Development Block Grant Funding Workshop. With me today and helping with the presentation, we will have right here on my right is going to be Charlotte Woody, who is our assistant director with regards to economic and community development. Then right next to her, we have Alfie Miller, who is our program specialist, who is also with our department. In the back, as far as our technology, definitely must recognize Rachel Gamble with regards to assisting us today as far as technology in the presentation that we will be presenting. Taking all of that into consideration, giving y'all a little bit of time to find your space as far as seating. Again, the surveys box on the end, please make sure that you provide that information to us prior to you leaving. And then also we're going to ask that you hold all questions to the end so that everyone will have an opportunity to hear all of the information, and then we will take questions again at the end. If you have not signed in, please go ahead and do so now. So definitely want to start off talking a little bit about the funding source that we will be utilizing today. Today we will be talking about community development block grant funds. As a part of the presentation, prior to starting the presentation, just want to give you a couple of highlights. With this funding source, and we'll talk about several things that you'll hear repetitively throughout the presentation. There's a reason for that. We want to make sure that you are catching on to what that information actually is. This funding source, as far as the applications that you would be submitting to us, the applications will be due in December. However, the funding will not be available until July 1, and it depends upon when we receive our funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. During the presentation, we will talk a little bit about what type of funds these are. Again, these are through the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. And as a part of these funds, we receive them as a grantee each year. As Rachel brings up our presentation, we will kind of talk a little bit about what that looks like. Public service. Most of you may be providing some type of public service. At least that's the biggest amount of applications, the largest amount of applications that we receive each year. We can only spend 15% of our total allocation on public service. For the last few years, that has been approximately a little bit less than $300,000. So it'll teeter because we received about $1.8 million over the last few years with regards to the funding source that we receive. And with that funding source, again, you can only spend up to 15%. Some years it's been $250,000, some years it's been $285,000. But when we talk about social service, and you'll hear about it a little bit more in the session, that we're talking about those things that you can't necessarily touch, as far as the tutoring programs, as far as the meals programs, looking at counseling and other things of that nature. Then on the other side, we'll have our bricks and mortars that deals with acquisition, construction, those types of things, rehabilitation. We'll talk about that as well as a part of the presentation. So we have already started off with, let me talk a little bit about our purpose. So for these particular funds, again, I've talked about that they are from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So with the funding source that we are utilizing, please make sure that as you're thinking about your application, that with this funding source, these funds are provided for low to moderate income activities, okay? So with the funding source, these are to develop viable urban communities by providing decent housing and suitable living environment, and by expanding economic development opportunities. But again, these are funds principally to serve low to moderate income individuals. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation, but as we move forward, definitely want to talk about the national objectives. For the national objectives, every application or every activity that you are presenting to us, that it must meet one of these national objectives. We have those on the screen. The first one could possibly be a benefit a low and moderate income individual. It could be to aid in the prevention or the elimination of slum and blight, or to address an urgent need. We will talk about these a little bit more in depth as we start talking about the application process. As we move to the next slide, I want to talk about up under community development block grant funds, the uniform guidance. So some of the guidance in regards to this information is audit requirements. So we have highlighted what that will be as far as the section of the federal guidelines. Also talking about, we look at risk, waste, and misuse of federal funds. And then also looking at the OMB circular, which is the super circular that actually oversees this particular program. As we move forward, one of the things that you'll notice is a lot of things that we talk about are in acronyms. So with those acronyms and those terms, we want to make sure that we at least give an opportunity at the beginning to let you know what those are. The first ones we have are ECDD. A lot of times you'll see our department abbreviated. That stands for Macon-Bibb County Economic and Community Development Department. Also with CDBG, that stands for Community Development Block Grant Funds. For CDBG-CV, that stands for Community Development Block Grant Funds, and that's coronavirus. Then you might see program year, which would be PY. That is July 1 to June 30th. So the next one would be our fiscal year, which happens to be the same, which is July 1 to June 30th. Also, HUD, you may see a lot. That actually stands for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. As we move forward with our acronyms, we have LMI or LMA. That means low to moderate income individual or area. PB, that means presumed beneficiary. SSI, that means supplemental security income. TANF, that means temporary assistance for needy families. SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, also known as food stamps. TA, that means technical assistance. AMI, that means area median income, and this is also considered to be the midpoint of a specific area's income distribution. So we will talk about that as well. Then when we move to the next slide, we're going to talk about some of the terms. I've already said one of the terms, which is grantee. So we are a grantee, so we actually receive funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's not listed here, but you may also see participating jurisdiction. So the grantee in this situation is any person or their authorized agent who has been awarded a grant. Subrecipient, that it would be you if you were applying and you are a non-federal entity that expends federal awards. And then also household, that's family versus individual, because depending upon what your application may be, your household may be the family individual, or it could be everyone within that household, depending upon what type of service it is that you are presenting and moving forward with. And again, that is composed of one or more people who occupy that particular housing unit. So I've talked about AMI. That next slide that we have is going to show you a little bit and give you an observation of the AMI. With the AMI, as far as the area median income, this is information that is provided to each jurisdiction that receives funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development each year. This one right here is updated as of April the 18th, 2022, but we do receive one on an annual basis. Sometimes the numbers change, sometimes they stay about the same. We talked about with regards to the household. So if you look at the numbers here and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, that means that's 4 people that live within your household, and based upon those 4 people, all of the income as far as the individuals who are working that live in the household, that they cannot make more than $31,700 if you are very low income. Extremely low income is $27,750. And then low to moderate income, which is 80%, is $50,700. So again, with this particular graph, this is information that is provided from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. As we move forward, definitely want to make sure that we highlight what our application process is. You've already met the first deadline. The first thing is that for our funding source, because it's a lot of information, we do require every agency that is submitting an application to us to come to the funding workshop. So that means that you receive all of the information at the same time. This is a very competitive process, but also it gives you an opportunity to ask questions as far as different types of things that you may not understand that we are presenting today. We have one session that started this morning again at 10 a.m. We have another session this evening that's at 5:30. So you would have to, that's why it's very important that if you are representing more than one organization today, before you leave, that you sign in for all of the organizations that you are representing. Also, the next thing is that the application will be emailed to you along with the instructions book, okay? So, and we'll have the application on our website, but it will not have instructions. But because you were here, you get the instructions. We'll email that to you, and that will go out tomorrow to each person that attends. The next deadline is Friday, December the 2nd, that you need to remember. That is when your application is physically due within Macon-Bibb County Economic and Community Development Department. Our department is located on the first floor of the terminal station. So as soon as you come into the front doors of the terminal station, you go to the left through this opening, and then we're right there on the left. So want to make sure we time and date stamp everything, just in case you weren't sure. We time and date stamp. So if the time and date stamp says 5:01, that means that your application is late. So we must have everything by the deadline. We even have people that will submit their applications prior to the deadline, because we understand that that may be a day that you're not going to be in the office, or whatever the circumstances may be. We just ask that you call and let us know, and then once you drop those off to us, that we give you a time and date stamp with regard to that as well. The next thing to keep in mind is that we do not accept fax or email applications. Let me explain to you why. So we don't accept fax and email applications because we're with the local government. We have a firewall, and it's a good firewall. So we don't know that you sent us that application that went to spam because it had all of those other things in it, or it may encrypt the information. So we want to make sure that we receive your application. So again, that's going to be a hard copy that you will need to bring to our office, as well as an electronic copy. And then we will go through that again, just to kind of talk through that. You'll hear that a couple times in the presentation. But again, you must bring it into our office. You cannot fax it to us, and you cannot email it to us, because sometimes that does happen. The next thing is the next part, that applications that are received, we do have a review committee and a review process that normally will happen about February to March, to actually review the applications that we receive, and then also make recommendations. We're reviewing them for eligibility, as well as looking at what the impact will be as far as the other applications that are submitted at that time. Again, these are tentative dates. As we go to the next slide, we start off with Sunday, April the 2nd, 2023. That is an approximate date that we anticipate that we will be ready to advertise what the recommendations are for a 30-day comment period. That is a requirement of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, that we advertise for 30 days. Normally, our method of advertisement is that we advertise in the Telegraph, as well as through the Macon Black pages, and then other sources as far as putting it on our website. And then we also have it as far as other electronic methods, if they are available, depending upon what happens in that situation. Understanding that everything that we talk about today will be based upon the availability of funds. So once we hear what that allocation will be for the year is when we actually announce what the recommendations will be. So just to give you an idea, the last few years we have not heard until a little bit later in the year. This year, I think it was March, or the end of March or April, before we heard what the allocation would be. So we were not able to stick to our schedule. We had to somewhat modify to actually present that information. The other thing is that I've talked about that 15%. Let me be honest. that if you submit an application for $2 million, you're probably not going to get it because we receive less than that. And I gave you that as an example because every year we receive applications that are more than our total in allocation. So just want to go ahead, put that out there. The last couple of years, we've gotten a little bit less than $1 million. And of those funds, that there's certain percentages that we can spend on certain types of activities. But just want to definitely make sure, and I know I see a couple of you smirking like, why did she say it like that? I said it like that for a reason, is that I understand from a nonprofit standpoint, you've taken the time out, you've put in the application together, but it's nowhere even near anything that we could ever possibly assist you with. So we try to, even though we don't know what the actual allocation will be, we try to give you a gauge of what we're looking at based upon what we've received previously. We don't know if it'll be more money or if it may be less money, but the one thing that we do know is what tradition has been. So tradition has been that we've received approximately about 1.8. We've received a little bit less than that in some years. The other part of that, we can only spend 15% again of our total allocation towards social service types of activities. The most that we've ever done is probably about $300,000. So just want to make sure that we are explaining that very well. And again, it's based upon the allocation for the year. The other thing that we do is we actually do a public hearing. So as a part of that public hearing, after we have advertised what the recommendations are, what agencies that may be getting the funds for that year, understanding that even though your application, we may not be able to fund the whole application, but it's a good application. We may recommend that it be for a lower amount because we just don't have the funds to do the project that's being put forward. And if you can't do it for that amount, then we understand. The next thing is that in April of 2023, it will also be presented, hopefully, to the mayor and commission, the board of commissioners, for them to actually review the information that we're recommending as far as that budget is concerned. Then we try to actually submit the information once that has been reviewed and then the resolution has been amended. Then it will go to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. When we go to the next slide, our last tentative date that we're looking at is having that information actually approved by May the 2nd so that we can meet the potential deadline of May the 15th of submitting our application to the Department of Housing and Urban Development as far as what type of funding we anticipate on utilizing in our community as far as the agencies and different activities that may be receiving funds for that particular year. Now, I have said a lot of information, but I'm just the tip of the iceberg. So now we will have Ms. Woody that will come we'll have Ms. Miller that will come forward that will talk a little bit about the CDBG application requirements. Please do take notes, but everything that we have as far as the PowerPoint, it will be in the instructions that you receive as well. It just may be in a different format, but everything that we're talking about now will be there other than the funding amounts that we've done previously and some of the other information that I've given to you just as a little bit of insight to this program.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Good morning, everyone. As Ms. Jackson stated, my name is Alfay Miller, and I'm the program specialist. Can you hear me? Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is the application requirements. Next slide. As we go to the next slide, application requirements, the CDBG application are accepted on an annual basis, and your agency organization must be either a public agency, private, nonprofit entity with a current 501c3, or a neighborhood group agency that is partnering with a private nonprofit entity with a current 501c3. In addition, the project must meet one of the national objectives that Ms. Jackson has already stated. Also, your application must include agency and organization proposed that other funding sources have been obtained, meaning that if you have other funding, make sure that you include that in your application. Also, well, the new thing that has come out April 4th, 2022 is the DUNS number has been replaced. So you will need to get your UEI, which is the Unique Entity Identifier Number. You need to have that on your application, and you could go to sam.gov to get that. Next slide. Your agency organization must report status of all funds requested or proposed from other sources. Agencies, organizations must report the status and accomplishments of any previously received CDBG funds. If you received any funds from CDBG, we need to know the status of that, and we need to know any accomplishments, whether it's current or even previously. If you've received funds, we need to know how you use those funds and what are the accomplishments from those funds. Projects that serve low to moderate income residents within designated target neighborhoods or low to moderate income areas will be given strong consideration. Consideration should be taken when selecting a project and preparing the application to ensure that environmental and historic preservation impediments don't cause your application to be denied. Canvass the service area and address any environmental concerns. Just means that if you do go to a low to moderate income area, just make sure that you canvass it. Make sure you look at the needs in that area before you submit your application. Look for the low income, either housing or people, whenever you submit, because those applications will get lots of consideration. Next slide. ECDD reviews program applications to identify those that best fit within CDBG priorities, which include community building, neighborhood revitalization, which could include crime prevention activities that reduce or eliminate the crime within a neighborhood, such as youth intervention programs. And another priority would be homeless services that assist families and individuals that are at risk of becoming homeless, or reduce the number of homeless residing in parks, streets, and abandoned buildings. Another priority, economic development, job creation, creating economic opportunities in the community. And final priority, rehabilitation and development, which means minor home repair activities are necessary repairs within a homeowner-occupied home where the homeowner is unable to afford the cost of repairs. Next slide. CDBG funding guidelines. For a public service project, you must have a minimum of 20% matching fund, a max of 50% matching funds in the form of in-kind or volunteer labor at a rate of $29.95 per hour. Construction rehabilitation projects must have a minimum of 100% cash match dedicated to the construction project. In-kind contributions or operating funds would not be considered as matching funds. Acquisition projects, acquiring or gaining possession of real estate, must have a minimum 50% cash match. In-kind contribution or operating funds will not be considered as matching funds. As we move forward, before receiving approved funds, your agency organization must execute a contract with the Macon-Bibb County. All funds are distributed on a reimbursement basis when the necessary documents are received by ECDD. So please keep that in mind, that the funds are reimbursed after you submit all of your documentation. Adequate management and physical control must be demonstrated within your agency and organization. Next slide. Here are a few activities that are eligible for CDBG funding. Public facilities and improvements, construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation of public facilities. Public service, assist low to moderate income persons with employment, child care, education courses, housing counseling, housing rehabilitation, minor home repairs, emergency home repair. A reminder that each activity must tie to a project. Next slide. Activities that are not eligible for CDBG funds. Building of general conduct of government. Funds cannot be used to build a city hall or anything that relates to the government. Political, religious activities, you cannot use the funds for those. And you cannot use the funds for fines, late fees, penalties, etc. Those are not eligible activities. Unallowable costs. Next slide. unallowable costs include these items. Funds cannot be used for any of these items. Example, alcohol beverages, fines, or political activities. Next slide. Now we're going to talk about the CDBG project budget. Next slide. Here are examples of most commonly used line items. Personal services, expenses for salaries or wages for all persons to be employed by the CDBG funded project, along with related employee benefits. Promotional advertising on behalf of the CDBG funded project. Communication, such as office phones, cell phones, internet, cable and satellite TV is not included. Operating supplies are also all types of supplies consumed in the operation of the CDBG funding project. Next slide. These budget forms must be completed in this order, which is included in your application. Budget itemization form shows the anticipated expenditures for the proposed project. Budget narrative form explains the budget expenditures and provides details for each line item. The budget summary form shows the anticipated revenue and expenditures for the project. All of these documents, like I said, will be in your application. At this time, I will turn the presentation over to Ms. Woody, our Assistant Director.
Good morning. Just want to remind everybody that I know some of you are taking pictures, but just to save you a little bit, everything you see and hear today, you will get in your email on tomorrow. So to save you a little bit, so you won't have to keep taking the pictures. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. Miller, as well. I am going to talk about the second opportunity for funding through this workshop today, and that's the Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus. And this particular pot of funding came from the opportunities that were presented to communities in response to COVID-19. So you ask, what is the CARES Act, which is part of how this funding came about? The CARES Act, also known as the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, is a law meant to address the economic fallout of 2020 coronavirus pandemic in the United States. The Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Grant, of course, from the CARES Act, provided a special allocation to jurisdictions based on the 2020 allocation formula. The formula provided information as to the percentages of the special funds that could be provided to jurisdictions, and you've heard earlier that Macon-Bibb County is a participating jurisdiction in order to address the pandemic in the affected community. Next slide. These special funds must be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic, or you'll see throughout this presentation also noted as COVID-19. While many of the activities are similar to what you just learned through the CDBG program, there are some eligible activities that will only be eligible for reimbursement under CDBG CV funding program. We'll talk more about those activities as we move further in this presentation. In regards to the CDBG CV application requirements, in order to apply for this funding, you will be provided with an emailed application for CDBG CV as well as a separate application for CDBG. You are welcome to apply for both programs if applicable, or you can apply for a single or multiple programs under either funding opportunity. We do ask that you place a priority number if you are submitting multiple applications under multiple funding sources. That way we can determine which application you would like to be considered first, second, and so forth. There is no limitation on the number of applications that you can submit. However, all information for that proposed program must be provided in that application. We're going to move forward with our application requirements. Again, the applications and proposals for the funding source that I am referencing, CDBG CV, must, and let me say it again, must focus on prevention, preparation for, and in response to COVID-19. Proposals must still meet one of the 3 CDBG national objectives that were identified earlier. Applicants must be a nonprofit agency with current 501c3 status serving Macon-Bibb County. And of course, all proposals must serve low to moderate income individuals or families who meet the criteria defined for this funding source. And again, those 3 national objectives are benefit low and moderate income persons, aid in the prevention or elimination of slum and blight, and then of course addressing an urgent need or problem in the community. In regards to our criteria for the application, the applicant must report the status of any requested or proposed funds from other sources. You should also report the status of any CDBG CV funds received previously. Say you may have been awarded money a year ago. You need to report that and any accomplishments, of course, from those programs. Strong consideration will be given to those projects that serve low to moderate income residents. So in selecting your projects, please research to ensure there are no environmental or historic preservation impediments that could possibly cause your application to be denied or your approval delayed. In regards to additional funding guidelines for CDBG CV, again, you're going to hear this several times, your funding proposal must focus on prevention, preparation, and in response to COVID-19. You will need to identify a specified time period for your project as well as a project summary. All applicants will need to provide their unique entity identifier information. This became effective on April the 4th, and it is used across the federal government. Number was changed from the DUNS number. I know some of you are familiar with providing your DUNS number, but now you will need to provide what you will see on your form as the UEI. If you do not have a UEI, you will need to go to www.sam.gov to make sure that you apply or make sure that you are registered so that you can have your UEI number for your application. It is the primary means of identifying entities registered for federal awards government-wide in the system for award management. Categories in which funds will not be granted include any reducing of existing deficits, any audits, entertainment, lobbying expenses, as well as any other ineligible expenses identified under both the CDBG and the CDBG CV program. For additional information in regards to your funding guidelines for CDBG CV, once an agency's proposal has been approved, the applicant will need to execute a contract with Macon-Bibb County. You will also need to be able to demonstrate that you have management and fiscal control within your current organizational structure. All funds dispersed will be on a reimbursement basis. In regards to our eligible activities for CDBG CV, they are building and improvements, including public facilities to establish an infectious disease treatment clinic, provisions for economic development, a provision of a new or quantifiably increased public service. Remember that it must be in preparation for, in prevention of, and in response to COVID for CDBG CV. Other ineligible activities for CDBG CV includes those activities that will not be considered for funding, as well as the items that cannot be funded in a program's implementation. These include buildings for the general conduct of government, general government expenses such as maintenance, repair, and operating costs, political and religious activities, as well as fines, penalties, late fees, or taxes. Some additional unallowable costs that are also the unallowable costs for CDBG includes alcoholic beverages, entertainment, outstanding debts, fines and penalties, as well as political activities and lobbying. In budgeting for CDBG CV, applicants will need to ensure they follow the instructions outlined in the application budget instructions. This is a listing of CDBG CV related budget line items, but please note this listing is not all conclusive. Office supplies, mileage, personnel services, professional services, repairs and lease of equipment, transportation, and please note that some of the line items shown here may be different from those of the CDBG grant. For example, in the CDBG grant, food is not an allowable item. But under CDBG CV, food is an allowable item as long as it is in preparation of, prevention of, and in response to COVID-19. For your CDBG CV budget forms, again, very similar to your CDBG application program, in your proposal, you will need to complete the budget itemization form, which shows the anticipated expenditures for the proposed project, the budget narrative form, which will further explain your budget expenditures and provides details for your line items, as well as your budget summary form that will show the anticipated revenues and expenditures for the project. For your project budget, the project budget will run from the initial start date of your contract until June 30th, 2024. In order to consider project budget needs, applicants need to provide the budget for their proposed budget, and then understand that if a proposal is funded, it may not be funded for 100% of your requests. So agencies should be prepared to expend their matching and or support funding in that case. Funds, again, are provided on a reimbursement basis in accordance with what is considered eligible expenses for CDBG CV. During the review process, and we are considering proposals when the applicant ensures that we have the following. Your application must be completed as specified in your application packet. Your executive director and your board president must sign the resolution. You must have complete and accurate budget forms. Please check your totals as well as what is requested of CDBG CV and or the CDBG program. And ensure that your project is meeting one of the 3 national objectives that has been mentioned for both CDBG and CDBG CV. We will notify you of the status of your application. For the application format, please prioritize your applications if you are submitting more than one application for the funding opportunities. And this will apply to both CDBG and CDBG CV. So if you have multiple, make sure you list 1, 2, 3 so you'll know, we'll have some idea of which one you want to be considered first. You will need to provide us with a hard copy and a digital copy that must mirror each other of your application. And when I say that, that could be in the form of the USB drive or CD-ROM, but you'll have to have the hard copy as well as that. What we also ask is that you do not put any permanent binding or staples on your documents, a binder clip, or put in a 3-ring binder, because we do take the document apart as we go through to review for all the items that we're looking for as far as eligibility. All your applications must be typewritten and contain a table of contents and a tabs or section divider to identify the different sections. And of course, you can attach any additional copies of additional documents if you need to do that. And then of course, make sure that you complete a separate application for each project that you're requesting funds for. So if you're requesting 2, it shouldn't go back to the last one. It should have, if it's the same information, it's the same information. It needs to be in the other application because it may be split, or there may be 2 different review committees, and you want to make sure you have all of your information in your application. You will submit that application To Wazina Jackson, our director at Macon-Bibb County's Economic and Community Development Department. And again, we are located on the first floor in the terminal station. It has to be there by 5 p.m. on December the 2nd. We do time and date stamp every application that comes in. No facsimiles or email submissions can be accepted. As we near the close of this presentation, I want to remind everybody that we need you to please complete the survey. That is an opportunity for another funding option, but we have to survey any clientele that we come before so that we can get an idea of what is needed in our community. So if you could please provide that to us, and then I am going to turn this presentation back over to our director, Ms. Wazina Jackson, as we get to the closing part of the presentation and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Miller and Mrs. Woody. In regards to the presentation, told you it was a lot of information, but we will be emailing you instructions that will have the information that we have been presenting today. These are just some of the highlights, so we do encourage you prior to actually starting on your application that you do read through the instruction manual to make sure that you understand what will be required and need to be provided. As we move to the next slide, we will be providing a couple of links as far as different sources that talk about this particular funding sources. And this is HUD.gov as well as HUD Exchange Info. I talked earlier about the OMB, the Super Circular. We also have the Super Circular site as well. Then census data, depending upon what your application is, that you may need some data with regards to our community. Then also, just to give you an idea as far as playing by the rules handbook, as far as community development block grant funds, gives you an idea of what we're looking for. I'll be honest with you, the funds that we received, that we do ask a lot of questions. And as a part of that, that this is information that we are also reporting back to the Department of Housing and Urban Development as far as the funds are concerned. And any funds that we actually expend as far as these programs are concerned, that we must show who it is that we have served, what category they fall in, and what were the services that were provided. The next information is just our department, which is Economic and Community Development. When you receive your email tomorrow, it will also have a link to, you'll have a copy of the actual application, but you'll also have a link that will show you where to find that on our website. Again, this will not be until tomorrow because we do have another session this evening. The next thing is that we have provided a link as far as the federal regulations for community development block grant funds, as far as the 24 CFR Part 570. That gives a little bit of information. And then also for coronavirus, giving some information as far as guide for infectious disease with regards to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That being taken into consideration, we are coming down to the home stretch. As we go to our next slide, definitely want to do another reminder that the information will not be received as far as the application until tomorrow. That's February the 28th. Friday, October the 28th, with regards to that particular information. Then also the deadline is Friday, December the 2nd. 5 p.m. in our office. Again, we do time and date stamp the applications that come in as far as our office is concerned. Another reminder with regards to the applications that we do not accept fax, nor do we accept emails of the application. So they must physically be brought into our office. We also have from time to time that people will FedEx them. They will do UPS, they will do regular mail. But again, all of those must be received by 5 p.m. So anything that, even if we receive it in the mail, which we do have a couple of our agencies that will mail in their information, they'll do it early. Most of the times they will do it at least a week early just to make sure that it gets there. Because if for some reason the mail didn't run that day, something happened, guess what? Your application is now late because we time and date stamp everything that comes in as far as those applications are concerned. Now that we've done a couple of highlights, definitely want to make sure we remind you again as far as your survey is concerned. And we are at the point of asking questions. Does anybody have any questions? So what I'm going to do is, so that we can make sure that everybody hears what the question is that we're going to ask that at the time that you ask your question, that you speak and actually let us know what that question is, and then we'll give you an answer.
Thank you. For the submitting of the PDF and the hard copy, if you're doing both grants, you need to submit two separate ones, one for that grant and a hard copy, then another PDF and a hard copy for the CV. If you're
Yes,
doing
so
both.
for each individual application that you will be submitting, that you will need to submit a separate application for each one. So let's say that you've decided that you want to apply for Community Development Block Grant Funds regular money, and you also want to apply for the one that will go toward coronavirus, then you would need to submit two applications. If you decided that you wanted to submit two activities that were up under regular funds as far as Community Development Block Grant Funds, again, that's two applications, two total packets as far as that information is concerned, because we do have a review committee and they will be reviewing each one of those applications individually. The other thing to keep in mind, if you submit more than one activity application to us, that you must prioritize on the application what's priority one, what's priority two, what may be priority three, or so forth and so on, depending upon what is submitted. Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Nice and convenient since we were right here together. For the CDBG CV funding, that due date is also the same as the regular funding, correct?
Yes, we are actually doing the same due date. I know we normally do it separate, but we said, hey, we've got an audience all together. We're doing both applications together as far as submitting that information. For some agencies, it may be easier because you still have the same background information and just putting in whatever that activity will be.
Next question, sorry. For the regular CDBG funding, is that grant cycle going to be July to June? I know in previous times y'all have extended a little bit.
Again, it'll be based upon the availability of funds. Great question. Even though our fiscal year starts July 1 and goes to June, we cannot do contracts until we've actually received what the amount of funds that we will receive for that particular year. I want to say this year we started the contracts, I want to say it may have been October, November, when those particular contracts went out for previous funds. So it just really depends upon when we receive the funds in, and at that particular time, that if there's an extension as far as the time frame, we normally tell the agencies. Yes.
Thank you.
Is there another question? No other questions? So just while you're thinking about whether you want to ask that question now or not, because I know there's some burning questions, that this is a very competitive process. As a part of this being a very competitive process, that we want to remind everyone that if you follow along as far as the instructions and you answer the questions, that you will have a complete application. When you start skipping the questions, that will make your application incomplete. Okay, so just want to put that information out there as well, is because we do have a series of things that are being asked. The other thing is that even though you give us what the dollar amount is that you would like to receive for your agency, that if you do not provide a budget, that still is an incomplete application. Just to give you a couple of examples of some of the things we've seen over the years. Awesome applications, a lot of information. Guess what? Didn't even tell us how much you were asking for. So that would be an incomplete application. So we ask that you really think about it, because it may be a little intimidating when you see the instructions, but we have put everything in the instruction book we think that you may ask or that you may need as far as your agency is concerned, okay? All right. So, if there are not any more questions, what I want to do is we were dividing and conquering this morning, so we do have a couple more of our staff that are here as well. From our project management standpoint, we have our project specialist, Lisa Lattimore Kelly, that has joined us. We also have our redevelopment manager that deals with construction and things of that nature, Antonio Simmons, that has also joined us as a part of this session. Definitely wanted to give you what those names are, because if you become one of our agencies, depending upon what you're submitting to, as far as our agency is concerned, you might have some type of interaction with some of these individuals. Again, thank you so much for coming today. As you leave, please make sure that you take time to drop your handy dandy survey into the box. So we will have some more surveys that we will be doing throughout the community. So if you feel like this is something that you might want to provide to your agencies, just give us a call as well, and we will provide you the link, because we do have a QR code to do it, as well as a link to actually complete the survey. Just getting a little background information for another funding source that we will have coming online very soon. Are there any questions at this time? Yes. So for this particular one, yes, it is mandatory as far as a 501c3, but there are some sections in there, depending upon what it is that you're doing, that it will be a little bit different. Like if you were doing job creation, some other things that you can be a for-profit agency for. So just talk to us and we'll kind of let you know exactly if that's what you're looking for. But the majority of what we have available is going to be a nonprofit status as far as that particular activities. And the other thing is that the reason why I have not said definitely you cannot be a for-profit is this. We have partnerships. We have some for-profit agencies that are partnering with nonprofits. Well, in that instance, they are eligible as a part of that nonprofit to actually apply to us depending upon what the activity is that they're doing. So it's not an automatic no, you're not eligible, because in some instances there are partnerships. Glad you brought that question up. So when we have partnerships, that for the partnerships that you must name every agency that is a part of that partnership, as well as give us background information and identify who will be the lead agency. Because guess what? Somebody needs to be responsible. I know y'all say y'all all responsible, but when things don't go right, everybody thinks it wasn't my fault. So as a part of that, we want you to identify who the lead agency is, who the fiscal agent is, because sometimes the fiscal agent may be a little bit different from who the lead agency is. So those will be the things that you will need to identify as a part of that project. So if you have a partnership that you will be coming forward with, then please make sure that you provide us with that information. Is there another question? Yes.
Yes. Is it possible to schedule an appointment to have a sit down to get some direction based on what projects we're planning to do?
So this is a very competitive process. As a part of this competitive process, this is a mandatory session that everybody comes to. We cannot formulate individuals' applications, because then that gives those agencies an unfair advantage. What we do though, is that as a part of that technical assistance, that once we have finished the application process, and I see some faces I've seen before, either anytime outside of the cycle, that we will meet with agencies to just kind of, talk about, hey, this is what I want to plan, everything else. And then also, if you've submitted an application to us, we'll talk through that application. But we do have some agencies that outside of the cycle that have met with us previously just to say, this is what I'm planning on doing, or they may have not known if they were eligible or what the circumstances may be. Good question, because the other thing is that all the services that you will be providing must be for residents of Macon-Bibb County. These funds cannot go toward any other of the surrounding counties as far as services are concerned. So we want to make sure that you are aware of that as you're submitting your application.
So even if you service Okay, so if a facility is outside of the county that you want to, and you want to bring in people from Macon-Bibb County regardless, if the facility is not in Macon-Bibb County, you cannot, you don't qualify.
So I think it depends upon what depending upon what your application is. Again, it would be services for individuals within Macon-Bibb County. No, you cannot bus Macon-Bibb County to another county for the service. So, but it would be for individuals in Macon-Bibb County, whether you had a satellite office that would be located in Macon-Bibb County, or whether it may be some other type of service. It depends upon what the service is and everything else. But again, so just to be a little bit clearer, if you were doing a project such as what I'm thinking you're talking about, that it would be a limited clientele, that would be one of the objectives, where you would have to identify each individual that you were serving. That means what we would be looking at is, does that person actually reside within Macon-Bibb County that you provided that service to? What was the service that was provided, and how was that service actually done? So we may have agencies that serve surrounding counties. But as a part of the service is provided here for two reasons. One thing is, depending upon what the service is, that we want to make sure that you're providing something that the clients can actually get to the service. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we cannot provide services to individuals who do not live here. This money is for low to moderate income individuals in this area. Yes. Hold on just a minute.
Yes, I'm very new to this, and I was trying to follow along when it was talking about the percentages as far as matching, and I know you all said it is on a reimbursement basis. Does that mean that the organization needs to have the funds up front to do the whatever it is that they're trying to do, and then if you're approved, you'll get the reimbursement?
Yes,
Fine.
so
Okay.
with that particular, that's a loaded question, because we don't give lump sum amounts.
Okay.
So it's based upon whatever service is provided at that particular time. Give you an example. Let's say that you may be doing a program wherein each month your goal is to actually provide some type of service as far as tutoring or something like that, where you have identified those individuals. Then for each month, then you would provide that information. And let's say that there was something as far as the workbook, some other things that may have been a part of that, then you would provide us what that cost was for that particular month. We would review that, is it eligible, and then we'll pay you for that particular month. Then the next month, it would be the next thing as to what was done during that cycle. One thing that we try to do is that we ask for everything on a monthly basis. The reason being is we don't want you to end up in a situation just like we don't want to end up in a situation. We want to make sure that the service is provided to the low to moderate income individuals that have been identified as far as our community is concerned. But we also want to make sure that the agency is successful as well, because when you are not successful, that means we are not successful, and that means we've got to write it down and give it to the Department of Housing and Urban Development that we were not successful. And we don't want to do that. So we ask for everything on a monthly basis, because on a monthly basis, it's a whole lot easier to go back and correct something that happened within that 30 days than it is to correct something after a whole year of doing it incorrectly. So that's why we do it that way. So it's not a lump sum. So I'm glad you asked that question. It's not a lump sum that you're going to get up front. It's going to be according to whatever services were provided at that particular time that are being applied for during that month. We do have some agencies that it may not be a monthly reimbursement, but we still ask for a monthly report, because we want to know what's going on with your agency. In that monthly report, we're asking, do you have any struggles? Do you need any assistance? How can we help you be successful?
Okay.
So those are just some of the things to just keep in mind.
So, part B of that question, if the organization had to get funding elsewhere that deals with a loan, but you all do not reimburse debt, how does that work?
So I can't really answer that because I don't know what type of project you're talking in reference to. What I will say is that to take into consideration that most of our projects, it does have some form of match. And so as a part of that form of match, if you are utilizing some other funding source as far as the match, that would be something totally different. But on that particular, we are not encouraging nor are we requiring any agency to go out and get a line of credit. In most instances, agencies have some type of seed money or something to actually start the funding of the activity. Oh, we had a question over here and then we'll come back. Oh, okay.
Thank you. As far as eligible entities, nonprofits, are church entities eligible to participate?
It depends upon how the church is structured. So if you can actually you can participate. One thing that we do have, and I'll be honest with you, some people don't want to sign it. We do have a religious clause. That one of the things with the funding source that we are receiving, separation of church and state, just taking that into consideration, that cannot be a requirement of any services that you may be providing is that someone participate in a religious activity or anything like that to actually receive the funds. So there's certain waivers that we require you to sign off on, and we've actually had churches to give money back, so just take that into consideration as far as providing the services. It can be done, but it must be done that you're providing the service to anyone that falls within the income categories and meet the requirements, and that you cannot put anything more extensive on them as far as the religious requirement. I hope that answers your question.
So why is there not a residency requirement? And I say that because if somebody from Houston, Atlanta, Fulton, however it comes, come to Macon-Bibb County, yes, you provide the services to the people in Macon-Bibb County, but you take the money back to where you came from. So that means that the money don't circulate inside our system of society economically. We're still benefiting somebody else from another county. So why is there not a residency requirement that you be in Macon-Bibb County, that you're giving the service to Macon-Bibb County, since it's such a competitive place?
So to answer that question is that you have agencies, as I stated before, that may have satellite offices. They may be doing services in several different locations. So we're not necessarily saying that they must be housed here in Macon-Bibb County, because they may have a satellite location in Houston County, they may have one in Atlanta, but the main thing is that they must provide services as far as the individuals who are in Macon-Bibb County. And I'll be honest with you, there are not that many applications that we have received over the years from agencies that are not located within Macon-Bibb County.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you so much. Y'all have been a great group. And thank you again for coming today. If you have not filled out your survey, please do so before you leave. I just want to get a little bit of information from you all. The other thing is that you will receive this information. It's going to be several documents that you're going to receive in that email. So if you think you might have accidentally put the wrong email address on your sheet, you might want to come up here. The other thing is that if you do not receive the information by 5 o'clock tomorrow, because we normally send our emails out after 12 o'clock, that if you do not receive the information by 5 o'clock tomorrow, please contact our office. I'm only talking about situations we've had before. Contact our office, because sometimes it may go to your spam and we might need to resend it to you. The other thing is that if there is a letter off or anything like that, we might have to send it to another email address. So please, 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 please be looking at your email. If you do not receive the information, then please let us know, because we do send out the emails the next day, because we do have another session, so everyone will get the email at the same time. Thank you again. Y'all have a wonderful day.